Welcome to the read-along for Unit 1.02, Elements of Art. Lesson Introduction. The elements of art are the building blocks artists use to create artworks. The elements of art include line, color, shape, form, texture, value, and space. Artists use those elements to visually describe the subject matter and also to communicate ideas through their work. So basically, we know that when somebody makes a work of art, they use things like pencils and paint and charcoal and pastels and what have you, right? Whatever materials they want to use. But whenever they use those tools, we call them media, to make marks on a canvas or a piece of paper or to carve a sculpture, then the tools that they start using once they're working on that paper is the elements of art and principles of design. So you use things like line to describe your subject matter, to show us what you're trying to show us, and also to communicate ideas through their work. So if you want to say, the cat drinks milk, you're going to use things like line to show us that you're talking about a cat and a dish of milk. And you'll use texture to show us that the cat is furry. And you'll use space to show us that the cat is three-dimensional, right? So that's what that means. When you click through here on your own, be sure to pull up the student guide. It will help you as you go through the lesson. So, identifying the elements of art. As you read through the lesson, use the student guide to take notes about each screen. You may also make quick sketches of the images to go with your notes, and refer to the elements of art printout while you read. Identifying the elements of art. Artists compose artworks using basic elements or building blocks. The basic elements of art include line, shape, color, texture, value, space, and form. The way in which artists use those elements helps determine the style of the artworks. So be sure and click through this little widget on the side. It will show you different examples of all of those things we just mentioned. Line. A line is perhaps the most basic element in art. Simply put, a line is a continuous mark made on a surface. It has a length and width, but no depth. Lines are commonly described as horizontal, vertical, diagonal, thin, thick, free-form, spiral, or zigzag. American painter Grant Wood used horizontal and vertical lines in American Gothic to create structure and order. Look for them in the pitchfork, clothing, and buildings. Find other types of lines as well, such as curved and diagonal. So a line is a mark on a surface, right? Everybody kind of knows what a line is. It's got length and a little bit of width, but there's no depth, meaning it's not three-dimensional. And artists use them as really probably the very most basic element in a work of art. Contour and implied lines. Contour and implied lines. A contour line defines the edges and surfaces of a subject to suggest shape and volume. Notice how contour lines create the illusion of volume in the figure's hands and faces in Las Meninas by Spanish painter Diego Velázquez. An implied line is a line suggested by the arrangement of forms or by changes in value. In Las Meninas, the heads of the girls form implied lines that make the top of a triangle, and their dresses form the bottom, like that. Another example of implied line is found on the neck and face of the female dwarf at the right. Notice how the change in value creates definition between her face and neck. Look for more examples of contour and implied lines. And be sure and click through this little widget at the side. Hue, color, hue and the color wheel. Color is perhaps the most complex element of art. It has three main properties: hue, saturation, and value. Hue is the name given to a color, for example, red. We use a color wheel to organize hues into color groups and schemes, which are sets of colors artists use in artworks. Color groups include primary colors, secondary colors, intermediate colors, complementary colors, analogous colors, warm colors, cool colors, monochromatic colors, tints, shades, and neutral colors. Select color groups and schemes to learn about color in more detail. So be sure and come to this page and click through this whenever you go through here on your own. Color in works of art. You'll see many of the color groups and schemes in La Rana Maria by French artist Paul Gauguin. Gauguin used the primary colors, yellow in the bananas, red and blue in the clothing. Look for any examples of secondary, intermediate, complementary, analogous, warm, cool, monochromatic, and neutral colors. Then review color groups and schemes to see if you made the right choice. Color, saturation, and value. Hue is one property of color. Saturation and values are the others. Saturation, or intensity, is the concentration of pigment used to create a particular color. So basically, it's kind of like how bright a color is, saturation. When discussing saturation, we use terms like bright and dull. A color at full saturation has no black or white added. You can change the saturation by adding a neutral or complementary color. Where has Gauguin used highly saturated and less saturated colors in La Rana Maria? An example is the bright red in the woman's dress, which is highly saturated with red pigment. Value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. Look for green in La Rana Maria, then for light and dark green. Gauguin added white to green to make the light tint, and black to green to make the dark shade. Use the magnifier to study saturation and value in this painting. So again, come click through this widget on your own and it will show you some examples. It'll give you a better view. Shape. Shapes are flat, enclosed spaces. A shape is created by lines or variations in color and value, which defines its edges. Shapes can be referred to as geometric or organic. Geometric shapes, including circles, squares, triangles, rectangles, and ovals, usually have sharp edges and represent human-made objects or structures. Organic shapes are irregular or free-form and are usually used to represent the natural world. Gauguin used mostly organic shapes: flowers on clothing, leaves, mountains, and figures. He used some geometric shapes as well: circles for melons and halos, an oval for the table. What geometric shapes did Gauguin use for the bowl on the table? So organic shapes are irregular, freeform. I always think of these as shapes that occur in nature. So the leaves, the people, the branches, those are all organic. Geometric shapes are things, tend to be things that man made. So really straight edges, perfect shapes, think of pyramids or cubes. Those are geometric shapes. Form. Form refers to an object that is three-dimensional. It is an important element in sculpture. Forms have height, width, and depth, and could be free form or geometric: cubes, spheres, pyramids, cones, and cylinders. English artist Henry Moore used mostly free forms in this sculpture. Go to the next screen to see if you can find any forms loosely based on a sphere or cylinder. Okay, so here's the bronze sculpture of a reclining figure of a mother and child. So go through here whenever you check out this section of the content, and click through to look for spheres and cylinders. Implied form. In A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte, French artist Georges Seurat created the illusion of three-dimensional form by adding value to his colors. The darker areas emphasize the shaded rounding of the figures in this painting. This tricks the viewer's eye into seeing form or three-dimensional figures. Move the magnifier over the painting to see implied forms created by darker values on the figures. So this is sort of a fancy way of saying that he used shading to make his people and objects in his painting look three-dimensional, even though they're painted on a flat canvas. So you can see this lady and her umbrella look like they're three-dimensional and that they're rounded because of the way he shaded it. And you can see how, like on the woman's skirt in the background, it's a little bit darker on the edge. That makes it look like it's three-dimensional even though it's on a flat canvas. And that is called implied form. It looks three-dimensional even though it's really not. Texture. Texture is the tactile surface quality or feel of an object. Texture can be actual or implied. You feel the texture on sculptures and see it in paintings. Imagine what the surface of mother and child might feel like. So what do you think this surface of this statue feels like? Probably smooth because it looks shiny. Texture can be actual or implied, meaning actual texture is texture that you can reach out and really feel with your hands. Implied texture is when, say you make a drawing of a cat and you draw all of its fur and it looks like it's got a furry texture, but if you ran your hand over the paper, it would just feel like paper because it's just a drawing. That's implied texture. Use the magnifier to examine the textures that Henry Moore used to change the look and feel of the bronze. Does it appear rough or smooth, hard or soft? Even though the sculpture is bronze and therefore hard, the figure's flesh appears soft and supple. So be sure and click through here and check out the details of the sculpture.